From LPM,
Louisville Public Media.
Support comes from the Eye Care Institute and Butchertown Clinical Trials, where they strive for diversity, equity, and inclusion within their staff, patients, and clinical trial participants. To learn more, visit butchertown.clinic.
Sprinkle Sparkle contains adult themes and may not be suitable for all ages.
Access to pleasure and indulgence is our right, and we're entitled to it. It's not a favor that somebody's granting us. It's not a reward. It's just like why we're here. My hope is that people will listen to this and relate, even in the ugly parts, because there's something sparkling about that too.
So like self-care to
Black
me is redundant.
You have to fit in this box or you're too ghetto.
There's like this movement on TikTok that's about like romanticizing your life where you find
denied us for so long.
And
it's
normal and natural and like something I aspire to
and that is
achieve.
Doing what I was doing, but doing it for myself. You know what I'm saying?
Welcome to Sprinkle Sparkle. I'm Nubia Bennett. We are talking to Minda Honey and Shauntrice Martin.
I'll let the esteemed Shauntrice Martin go first.
Oh, Lord, esteemed, hold on. I'm Shauntrice. I am an artist and a mom. And
Shauntrice also is another one of my friends that I just love. I've known her since I was like 14 or 15 in high school. She's an artist. First and foremost, she's an artist. She was the Speed's first community artist in residence, and she had a exhibit in like December through February or November through February. It was beautiful. So she's a very talented artist, but she's also another community organizer. She's also a writer. She's also was the owner and creator of Black Market. She's not the owner anymore. She sold it to some other folks. Some other Black people that needed to be owning businesses.
I'm very much an abolitionist, but I'm inactive right now. I think I'm on sabbatical. The other thing that's important to note is I'm all over the place in a good way and on purpose. And I love that. And before I thought like you have to pick one thing and do that one thing. And every time I pick and do one thing, I'm miserable. So I'm very much excited that I'm okay with doing a bunch of stuff now because I'm good at most of it. So
she's also a really, she's a big deal. She's one like most admired woman one of those years. She's like a 40 under 40, super overachiever, but really cares. Both of them really care about this community. They love this community as much as I do. They love this community almost as much as they love me. That's all good because I love them back with as much intensity.
I'm Minda Honey, friend of the esteemed Shauntrice Martin, which, since
okay, so Minda is like most of my close friends are Jills of all trades, many trades. Most notably, she's a writer.
I'm in the process of working on my debut essay collection, An Anthology of Assholes, which is about dating as a Black woman in Southern California. And it's also, about coming of age against the backdrop of the Obama years when so much was changing around consent, gender, sexuality, class. So it's looking at a lot of things.
She's also been a professor, so she teaches writing. And she's worked in corporate America selling, I feel like it was like Rubbermaid. I might be wrong. But she likes to connect folks. Most notably, young up-and-coming writers. She's the founder of Taunt Louisville, which was Louisville's other alt weekly that highlighted Black and queer folks writing, and she paid them. But she's a little bit of everything. And most importantly, she's one of my really, really good friends. I have a theme, I guess, with the people that I'm close to, that they're all community connectors. And they're just people that make me, they're also in my inner circle group chat. And I think what you'll hear today is basically an extension of that group chat. That's what it feels like. So when I think about this episode, for me right now, where it takes me and where I hope it takes other people as they listen to it, was just the beauty of friendship as a pleasure practice across years, and just even like just the moving in and out of friendship, even just between the three of us. And then thinking about how maybe our mothers and their mothers did the same things. That just really stood out to me, and how friendship adds that sprinkle sparkle kind of into your life, because life is hard, but with friends it's bearable, and it can be joyful.
So I always like to kind of come to a consensus of what we even mean when we talk about pleasure. So first I want to come to one definition. So I guess both of you tell me what you feel or think of when I say that word. And then I think I want to come to like an agreement of this is what we think that this word means for us today, and just in this setting today, right now. So either one of y'all can start. What does pleasure mean to you?
I think pleasure is blissful, it's cleansing, and it's it's safe. It should be safe. Like, you have like this kind of safe, joyful contentment. You feel refreshed. You're pushing out all that, like wiping out all that negative energy, welcoming in positive energy.
I'm glad you said cleansing, because for me originally, pleasure was like, you don't talk about it, it's dirty. Like you need to do what it is that's going to keep some man there, or you need to do what's proper, especially as Black women, we're taught that like you have to fit in this box or you're too ghetto. Like my name is Shauntrice and it's 2 syllables, and there's some people out there that act like that's really hard to manage, right? And so like for a really long time, until my 30s, pleasure was just not even on the table really. I was more concerned with like, is the other person feeling good about what's happening, not just sexually, but in general. And then after my 30s, it was like, okay, but I don't like it. So for me now, pleasure is more of what you said. It's a cleansing. Like I feel good. It's like that, like a breath of fresh air, whether it's in the bedroom, boardroom, wherever I exist. Pleasure, yes, I love the definition you gave. It's freeing, it's cleansing, and it's normal and natural, and like something I aspire to achieve regardless of what the activity is.
Ooh,
I like that, pleasure as liberation. But then also the relationship between pleasure and agency. Like you cannot really have pleasure without agency. And I think for women, particularly Black women, trans women, women who are marginalized in general, like Shauntrice was saying, as we get deeper into our 30s and get older and we take more agency over our lives in general, it only makes sense that we would also take more agency when it comes to pleasure.
So we choose, with pleasure, we get to choose what feels cleansing and liberating. That's pleasure.
I would say too, it's like this joy without fear of loss. Like there is always this fear that if we don't do certain things, we're going to lose this imaginary man who hasn't even come around yet. And I love Cardi B, but I'm gonna use her as an example. She's pretty, she's talented, she, does all the things that all the boxes you're supposed to check. Yeah. And and her husband cheated on her. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he ain't a looker to me. He's not a looker. He, but and it's not to judge her, because I love Cardi B. What I'm saying is that like, even when we do all the things we're supposed to do, and people can argue, oh, she's not respectable, whatever. But when we do all the things we're supposed to do, we can still lose them. You can be skinny, you could be tall, short, dark, light, it doesn't matter. The dudes who cheat, and the dudes who don't. And I feel like, though, there's this thing looming over us that if we talk too much about what pleases us, you're at risk for losing some man. Even if you don't have one, you're at risk for losing the possibility of it.
Something else about pleasure, too, is that pleasure happens in the present, like it forces you to be present and to be in the moment. Like that's another thing, especially with women, that we can't really access that kind of sexual pleasure unless we are present in that moment. We can't be thinking forward. We can't be thinking backward. We have to be right there.
Yeah,
No, that's true. So we have to be able, so we get to, it's ours. I feel like what I hear, like all of these things come back to it, it's ours. That's what it is. It's like, it's freeing and it's free of loss and it's liberating because of the fact that it's ours. It's mine. Yeah. It's yours. It's yours. Yeah. It's ours. Yes. I love it.
And, you know, we're not saying anything new. Like Audre Lorde came with all of this when she's talking about the erotic is power. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, pleasure really taps into that, you know, tapping into your own power when you have agency, when you have authority, when you are present, when you are liberated, when you are, you know, practicing like these cleansing rituals, then and that's why there is this kind of push to disconnect us from our bodies and to only see our bodies in the way that they can be in service to the patriarchy and to capitalism, which are all basically the same thing. So versus bodies in service to ourselves, you know? Yeah.
I mean, and so to your point, Minda, about knowing that none of this is new in general, right? It's been around. It's literally been the water that we were supposed to be swimming in the whole time. But Shauntrice, you mentioned that it's not always been that way. Both of you, could you expand on that? Like, what has been your relationship to pleasure over time? Like, since you could start from the beginning, you could start from like, since you've been an adult, like what's been your relationship to pleasure?
Well, I'll start like before sex was even something I thought about. When I thought about the things that pleased me, it was like, you know, doing art and being able to just go run outside, play sports. So I played football, I played soccer with the boys because there weren't like girls sports. I don't know if we had Title IX or whatever keeps the sexes having the same resources for sports, but like I played on boys teams because those were the teams that existed. But by many people older than me, I was told, okay, well, you're going to have to grow out of that eventually. Like, I know this brings you joy, but like, you're going to have to start like wearing dresses and, you know, not fighting all the time. Cause I did fight a lot. And then even thinking about
to
like
my
art,
benefit.
but even thinking about like art, you know, it was like, oh, she can draw, she's talented. That's really nice. But you know, you're not going to get a job. Right. So it's like the pleasure that I felt naturally, I sort of built up this way to push it away, I guess. And so as I got older, those same things came back in relationships. Mm-hmm. We were never encouraged to say upfront what you want. It's like you're waiting for a man to ask you, if he asks you, what you like and what you want, not just sexually, but, you know, for dinner, what do you want to eat? No, what do you want to eat? Like that scene in Coming to America, Child, whatever kind of food you like.
Bark like a dog.
Yeah. And for much of our 20s, we're all out here barking like some damn dogs. Hopping on one foot, looking beautiful, being beautiful on the inside, hopping on one foot, barking for some dude who's not even that interested in you. Right. And so for me, like I'm rediscovering pleasure. I always knew what I wanted. I always knew what I liked, but I also knew that being a woman, being Black, being dark skinned, all these different things, being from the projects, because some people feel a way about that. Mm-hmm. All those things are telling me, no, you're not allowed. Because I would see, you know, some celebrities name their kids Apple or whatever, but then a name like Shauntrice is too ghetto. So I would see that people who didn't look like me, didn't come from where I came from, they're able to do whatever pleases them at any time. Mm-hmm. But for me and people like me, it's like, no. Like if you're on food stamps, you definitely can't have birthday cake. You know, you can't buy birthday cake with your food stamps. That's too much. You need to stay in your place as a poor person. So as my experience with pleasure has evolved, I've just allowed myself to be pleased. There are some things I've learned in my 30s that I didn't even know I liked, because I never gave myself the opportunity and space to seek and discover and just enjoy the things. Like I would be like, oh, that's cool. And then like kind of pull back. But now, and thankfully it's because I'm around people like y'all, and I'm around people who encourage me to be happy without conditions, right? That pleasure is something I deserve, I want, and I'm a better person when I have those moments. So.
Yeah, pleasure is to exist without parameters, you know?
Mm-hmm. What about you, Minda? Like, what was your historically been your relationship to pleasure?
I guess I have to go back to really, like I said, like I moved to California to Southern California when I was like 22. And up until that point, I had been with my high school sweetheart, who was, you know, very loving, very like, you know, very into my pleasure. And then all of a sudden, as like a 22 or 23-year-old, I was just kind of like out in those streets in that dating world.
She was outside.
Like, yeah, I was very much, as the kids say today, outside. And you know, it was like I had a whole just like range of experiences, and to me, it kind of felt like a grab bag. Like, you know, the person you plucked out of like the little claw machine, the prize you got was the prize you got. And there was no like negotiating that. So like sometimes you found yourself with a partner who you just connected well sexually. Sometimes you didn't, and there wasn't what we have now, which is like all these like conversations around consent and pleasure and kind of figuring out what your partner wants or needs, because it's not one size fits all, you know? And so, you know, I would have partners in my 20s. Like I remember one time this guy was like going down, and I actually had the audacity to offer some directives. And he paused and looked at me. He was like, "I got this." And I was like, "Oh,
you don't."
I just kind of was like, "All right, well, time to like find somebody else." I think also, you know, a lot of like those sexual encounters, interactions were assisted by substances, and you know, I wasn't always fully present in a way that I am now in my 30s, and then realizing that like these are ongoing conversations that you have with your partner. And I think also like in your 20s, you just have a lot more energy, particularly, at least I did. I think a lot of people have a lot more energy, sexual energy. In my 30s, it's like, I have like, you know, some people are like, "Oh, I don't get out of bed for less than $10,000. Like, I don't get into bed for less than for less than a partner that is going to be X, Y, and Z." Like, you know, because it's just like, that's not worth taking off pants for. Like, you already you know, I can find just as much pleasure, you know, in my bed reading a good book as I can in my bed with like a subpar partner. So, and again, a subpar partner is somebody who's like not focused on your pleasure, who's like disengaged, and I think that seems like a good place to end that.
And listen, as you're talking, I'm having flashbacks of partners who fit that description, and I just want to fight them. Like, it's nothing you can even do to change them for the next woman and all that silly stuff. I just want to fight them. I just want one good fight.
Because like, can we just go outside? Let's just fight one time, and then we can like
girl gang.
Like, I will see you when I see you. But you know what though? I think to that point, I think about like, I'm like, my yeses have to be enthusiastic. So I tell people in general, I'm like, you're going to get a processing no. And I say that in quotes, like my no is immediate. It's like, "Do you want to do this?" And I'm like, and then it's like, no, until I'm very clear about yes. Like, and then when I say yes, it's like an enthusiastic yes, like, this is what I'm doing because this is exciting. And it literally, I feel it in my cells that I just want to say yes. But until then, you're going to get a no, and it's not a final no. It's a no until it's a yes, instead of it being the other way around.
Something else I've been thinking about too is that, you know, a lot of people have different hangups about like their bodies and where the bodies are going to look naked, and odors and hair and this and that. And or, you know, guys will try to make you feel that like, well, nobody's going to want to sleep with you if you're over 200 pounds, or if you don't do this, if you do that, blah, blah, blah. And I was telling a friend the other day, I was like, I mean, I've definitely slept with enough people to know that like, none of those things are relevant. Like, and there's something about being, and I think, like, not everybody needs to be having tons of sex, tons of partners, anything like that. People should do what they're comfortable doing. Mm-hmm. However, for me personally, one of the benefits from having had like a certain number of partners and a certain amount of like, casual encounters and whatnot, was that I realized that a lot of the things that men or the media, a lot of the messages that they were sending to women just weren't true. Like and when you realize those lies, that you need to be spending 90% of your brain power counting calories instead of living your life, finding pleasure. You can't be beholden to that. It's a lot harder for them to fit you into that box and make you beholden to those parameters that they're trying to put into place, because it's a lot. I've had dudes who I've had sex with, on like 100-pound range. And I don't even think it like
they didn't even notice.
Weight registered to them, like still a high quality experience. So they can't make you believe these things about purity and what a woman's supposed to be or how you're supposed to experience your life. The more experience you have, and that also includes sexual experience. And I think in those ways, sexual experience can be empowering. And initially we're taught like, oh, you're empowered because you're acting like one of the men, blah, blah, blah. You're like, it's like, no, being the worst of what men have to offer does not empower you. Like, that's not empowering. Treating them like thoughts in return is not empowering. But what is empowering is the knowledge that you pull away from those encounters, and even just beyond sex, like when I think about my greatest accomplishments, like those accomplishments happened at like my greatest weight. So so there's no correlation between like my success and happiness in life and what my body looks like, as long as like it's healthy and it gets me up every day and allows me to do things that I like to do. Like, that's what's important.
That's beautiful.
And once we start believing these parameters, then we get separated from our body, and then we get separated from pleasure, and we're separated from the erotic as power. And a lot of that is intentional.
I spent a lot of time, whether friends or otherwise, but really more so in dating, less so much with friends, being around people that weren't that into me, because I didn't know the difference, even though actually I did, because I have always had dope ass friends that just love me because I'm just like, oh, there's Nubia, she's laughing out loud and she's like rooting for people, but we just love her even when she doesn't know what's going on, like whatever, we love her because, and there's like ... And I've always had that, but I didn't know how to translate that into like that same pleasure I had around my friends. I didn't know how to tie that into the pleasure I had around because I just didn't think that was possible.
That's a major key. When you start holding your partners to the same bar you hold your friends. Yeah. I listened to The Tragedy of Heterosexuality on audiobook, and one of the things the writer said was that, she's like, most heterosexual relationships would not even pass the bar of standards that women set for friends. And it's so true. And that's another thing that happens in your 30s, where it's just like where you look at these partners, and for me, it's cishet dudes, and it's like, you can't be the worst part of my life, because that's just too easy of a problem to fix. Like,
oof, damn, drop the mic.
Well, and I was talking about this with someone who is pregnant, a mother to be, and she was just saying, like, I don't want to be the type of mother that my mother was. And one of the biggest things was she felt like her mother would bring a lot of men into their family situation. Like, she dated around whatever. And her mother was so gentle and nurturing to these men who were abusive, and, they were broke. They were all these things that her mother told her not to be, but she would make the smallest mistake and be screamed at, be hit. And it's like, you are willing to put up with all these things from people who don't care anything about you, but this one person who loves you so much, and you're the most important person in the world to them. Anyone with kids knows, like, you are their world, you're their world. And like, she just could not understand it until she got older and got in relationships. She was so scared to lose out on this relationship with a dude that like she was forsaking her friends, her family, people who've been there. And it's like, it's a weird thing to acknowledge. But one thing I've learned, even with my son, if I'm not, you know, if I'm with a guy and he upsets me, I'm not yelling at him and screaming at him. So why am I screaming at my kid?
Real.
Who
That's
literally
real.
anything he does wrong, quote unquote, is he's 8. Like this is his first time being in the world. He don't know how to deal with these things. And so like it really is a lot of self-reflection, and some of it is like mom guilt, but we are stuck again in this loop of like, we're going to lose out on this make-believe perfect dude that literally is only staying away from us because we have this flaw or that flaw or this thing, or you don't shave your armpits enough. You don't, you know, you don't cook often enough. So like, we're taught that like, there's a man right on the cusp of your reality. If you would only lose 10 pounds, if you would only, you know, get braces or whatever it might be. And like, I love that Minda said that about like treating the men who come in your life romantically as you would a friend. Because if your friend is screaming on you for something that's not your fault, y'all probably not gonna be friends, you know? And why are we not using that same standard? Because it's a good one. Like you just said, I've known Minda since I was in 5th grade. How many people are still cool with somebody they was cool with in 5th grade? And we've lost touch for years at a time, I think. Maybe not years plural, but for a long ass time. We didn't even see each other.
But we were watching from afar. We were
Thank God for social media, straight up.
Right, but it's like that bond is like sacred to me. Like if one day Minda was like, Shauntrice, I'm not feeling you, let's not be friends, I'd be crushed. And so it's like, why are we not looking for those same points of joy in romantic relationships? Because if I use the same standard that I have for my closest friends, it would be much different. I have not used that standard until my 30s, which is why I haven't been in another long-term abusive relationship, because I don't know if it's I hit 30 and like God snapped their fingers or what, but it's like, okay, I kind of see hints of BS. So I'm gonna just step back. Like I might screenshot and send it to y'all or somebody, but
it might even show up on Instagram.
But it's like, I'm no longer scared to be alone because I've been did that and I have a good life. Like, I would love a husband who's gonna be faithful, who's 6 foot or more or taller, who's like, you know, I would love to have that. That would be dope to share that with someone who you also get head from. That'd be great. But
maybe that's another thing between our 20s and our 30s is in your 20s, you're striving for this like certain kind of life. And then when all the pieces fall into place except for a partner, when you get to your 30s, you look around and you go like, oh, actually, I can have a great life, even if I haven't found the one. This too was a mess. This too was a lie.
No, that's and it's interesting to me because I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of like, I don't even remember if I had big dreams or goals. Like I knew I went to college because I had to, but I had a kid, like, bam, college, 2 years in, bam, got a whole kid. So the dream was like obliterated on the front end because you also receive these messages around, well, nobody's going to really want you now because you got somebody else's kid and nobody else is taking care of them but your family. And back then I wasn't finished with school. So I was like in my family, it was like, I might as well have had a kid at like 14, you know, even though I was 21, I might as well have been 14 because nobody else had kids at that age. My son is a full 10 years older than any of his cousins. But at the same, so I worked doubly hard after that just to prove that like, no, I'm not a failure. I'm not a failure. I can still do the things. I never even thought about being in a relationship with anybody because I was just like, the messaging around that, because it's literally ingrained in us everywhere that nobody wants you unless you can have all of these boxes checked.
But the thing is that every box you check though, once you check all the boxes, they come up with another list.
Absolutely.
Well, you're all of these things, but actually you, Black woman, have reached the apex of perfection, so you can't expect your equal anymore.
Look, it's like a Simone Biles. They were like, we can't even judge you. You're just so amazing
that you're too good.
We can't barely judge you anymore, so we're gonna unfairly judge you.
It's like, but then I think
how amazing you are.
that moment though, and I think that idea around leveling up on your friendships, like I think I did that first. First, I was like, okay, I got this kid. I don't want him to have these hangups that I have. So I'm going to front load him with these emotionally intelligent things. Like, this is what I learned. This is what I learned. This is what I learned. And then until he was a teenager, I have to give a star by that because teenager is hard. But and we're still going through it, but it's okay. But then I use those skills to level up my friendships. Like I was just having a conversation again with someone else about like, I've been relationship avoidant my entire adult life after having a child with somebody that I don't know that we liked each other very much at all in the beginning, but I've been avoidant of all of that. And I was like, and they asked me why I said yes. And I was like, because he treats me as good as my friends do. And I said that with full confidence that and going back to thinking about pleasure, right? Like it's my choice and it's my agency. And when I was unsure of like, where am I going to say yes? I literally said, I don't know what you're talking about. When he asked about it, I said, I don't even know what you're talking about. What you see, I don't see. So let's not have this conversation right now. And he's like, okay. So it was my choice to say yes to this thing, but this idea about agency and it feeling blissful and cleansing and at the measure that I hold my friendships. And I think at 30 something, we like, my friends are dope. Like everybody I know who is like 30 plus, who appears to have a good life is like, I have amazing friends that love me because I'm existing on this world. And I don't want anybody in my circle who doesn't. When I'm around people who don't love me like that, I'm like, why am I here? Why am I here? I don't think I should be here. This doesn't feel good to me.
So we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we'll talk more with Shauntrice Martin and Minda Honey. I'm Nubia Bennett, and this is Sprinkle Sparkle.
Support for the Louisville Public Media podcast incubator comes from the Community Foundation of Louisville, helping donors in our community establish charitable funds to meet philanthropic goals, creating opportunities to give more through scholarship, charitable checking, and donor-advised funds, and helping donors create a charitable legacy through their estate plan. More at cflouisville.org.
This is Robert Siegel, inviting you to listen to great podversations from the Kentucky Author Forum. This fascinating interview podcast is distributed by Louisville Public Media and available on your favorite podcast apps. Thanks for listening.
Welcome back to Sprinkle Sparkle.
So I do have a question then. I know we talked about not being able to see it. Like we talk about with partners and others. Who do you remember in your life at any point who embodied that agency and that pleasure, that basically lived by those pleasure practices, whether you were a child or whether you were in your 20s? There has to be somebody that you did see that with, maybe, or maybe there wasn't.
Wait, you're saying like someone who
embodied all of that yes or that no, that very clear yes or that no, like I want to be that when it comes to okay, who embodied? Do you have like, is there like an auntie? Is there like just a random person that's like, oh, they are leaning into their pleasure completely. I want to be like that, even if you didn't have the language.
So I was in 5th grade, I think, when my grandma passed away. Mm-hmm. And before that, of course, it's so long ago. I'm 36 now. I don't remember all the details, but I do remember like watching Tales from the Crypt with my grandma in the middle of the night, eating pickles. I remember, she would cuss people out. I remember that. Like, I remember her just being very much like, this is who I am. You can't really tell me anything about who I am because you're not me. She used to dress just so fancy. Like, I look back at pictures now and they don't do it justice, but I just remember her being like, I like this, I'm gonna do this.
I don't like that. I'm not going to do that. And more so that I'm not going to do that. Like, that sounds like a great suggestion for you in your life. I'm not doing it. Ooh. And so whenever we would spend time together, it was always like, I never saw her go do something that she didn't find pleasure from. You know, she wasn't just cooking and cleaning for some man. Nothing against if that's what you want to do with your life. She wasn't, you know, at some job being like miserable. So I only saw her doing things that she loved and enjoyed. And people flocked to her. You know, people loved her. People still talk about her to this day. And again, my memory might be skewed because that was 5th grade. That I don't know what age we were back then, but you know, I was really young. But I remember just seeing that, like, I want to do that. I want to be really confident. She wasn't a skinny woman. She wasn't a tall woman. She had no money, but like, she was so confident. And so, and I think she was missing a finger or something. She had diabetes. She was missing a finger. Like, it was, you know, she was the thing that they say, you ain't got no finger. You ain't gonna have no man. You know, she was overweight, all these things, but she was the embodiment of confidence. And like, I think to this day, whether it's subconscious or not, I do strive to be like her and my great grandmother who I grew up with, because they are the women they wanted to be, as far as I could tell from my perspective, you know, as a kid. But my great grandmother, she didn't pass away until my son was like 1. So I actually knew her a lot more. And it's like, she was who she was. She didn't play no games. Part of the reason she never learned how to drive, she was like, that's what men are for. Like, not as in like the men of the castle, whatever, but like, I'm not some peasant about to be driving myself around. Like, that's what men are for. That's what men need to be doing, driving me to where I need to go. So like, as much as I can, I try to bring those like themes to my life and what I want to do. Like, I don't want to be sitting in some place miserable, whether it's a job, school, whatever. And so I think for me, my grandma Peaches was that person.
Ooh, and her name was Peaches.
Yep, Grandma Peaches, Gladys Leak. And so, yeah, I think that for me was like, yeah, and she was a good person too. Like, she helped people with their rent. She did all these things. She fed people who didn't have food. So it's like, she wasn't just a bitch, you know, she was a good person and still did things that pleased her. So yeah, I think that's the person for me.
It'd be interesting to see what experiences gave her that outlook. Like, we've talked a lot about how turning 30 made us realize, or like certain experiences from our 20s. I wonder, like, back in the day, what it was that made grandmas be like, you know what?
Well, can I tell y'all? So this is all like speculation based on me doing research. I do a lot of genealogy with my family, with the Choctaw side, with the Black side. So my grandfather, Ronald Leak, I remember going to his funeral. He died before she did. The only 2 memories I have are that funeral for him. And then we were in like Village West in the projects or somewhere. And he said something crazy to her. And I remember she went off on him and hit him. And that was my first time seeing like a woman hit a man. I just remember being like shocked. And there's a newspaper article. This ain't funny. I'll preface that. It's not funny, but there's a newspaper article. My grandfather, Ron League, was killed, and they found him by the train tracks over here where I live now, because I bought a house close to where the house was we grew up here in the West End. And to this day, I think Ron Leak did something he wasn't supposed to do, and my grandma did something that she needed to do. I ain't gonna say too much, but
wow.
So not that I'm emulating that hypothetical part, but
sure.
Like, a woman who don't take nothing from nobody, man, woman, whatever, that she don't think she deserves is like something I aspire to, because for a long time I did take a bunch of stuff. And I like, and going back to our conversation around pleasure, like that for me is really it. We're so scared that what pleases us is going to drive someone away, that we don't embrace it, and then it comes out in other ways later. So I'm all about, I only got a few more years in my 30s, but I'm very much about getting all those experiences that I didn't let myself have before.
That's true.
So yeah.
Do you think also it's something about going back to one of the first things you said, Shauntrice, which was like around pleasure that you had as a child, playing, you know, sports, art, and those like pleasures were kind of like squashed and parameters were put on them to kind of like take the joy from them. Do you think now at this age, in our 30s, which, you know, the older I get, the more I realize that whatever age I am ain't really that old. Do you think that the hierarchy around pleasure has shifted? Like it's not as distorted. Like, you know, in our teens and our 20s, sexual pleasure is kind of put at the top of that pyramid, and it's supposed to be the aim, and it's like the holy grail, and this and that. And now it's like you can appreciate an entire array and a range of pleasures, and some of that is because now we have the agency, we have the power, have the ability to knock down those parameters that were put up around, you know, like art. You know, like I during the pandemic, I got back into collaging, and it's like I don't care if these collages are good or not. Like this is something that I'm doing for me, and I find joy in it. And I have just like the freedom to do whatever. As a grown woman, I got the freedom and fortunately the finances to do what brings me joy and pleasure. And I think like, yeah, the hierarchy is different. Like it's not as much of a hierarchy. It's more like a constellation now. Like there's all these like different entry points to pleasure, and they're all kind of like on the same plane. Do you think so, Shauntrice? Like it's...
Oh yeah. I mean, I think, and I'm gonna go back to my grandmother, like there were some things before I was born that she went through, maybe even before my mother was born, back when they were in Mississippi, you know, that she went through. She had abusive relationships. She had, you know, as far as work and being a Black woman in the South, trying to work without being demeaned is like almost impossible during that era. And even now to a certain extent. And I just feel like, yeah, we, as we're realizing that those barriers are just other people's insecurities, it's like now it's more open. We do, like you said, we see a constellation instead of like, I have to achieve these things on the wife scale in order to even be a contender for being somebody's wife / maid / cook, right? And so now we're like, actually, no, what I want is joy. And I thought that was the path to joy, was being with someone in a committed relationship, whether they cheat or not, because that's a big thing from our grandparents and great-grandparents era. Dudes have whole families in different states, depending on where the train stopped, right? And I feel like we're, I guess, unlearning that. And for me, that's a big thing. And that's also because I'm friends with women. Anybody who listens to this, women, be friends with women.
Oh my goodness,
I don't really hang with that many women. Most of my friends is dudes. I got dude friends too. And I'm sure they would take a bullet for me.
Yep.
But they remind me why
but
I shouldn't be with some of the bullet.
But if you took a bullet for them, would they like nurse you back to health? Would they help you process that trauma?
Man.
Would they drive you to
I just like that is the biggest change, is that I did have a lot of male friends, and we never had sex. Like I have male friends to this day who I've never had sex with. There's never even been sexual tension, but they're not the same as my women friends. Like you said, I can process things. I can have my feelings. Whereas if I cry in front of one of my male friends, they're just, oh, don't cry, it's okay, trying to get me to stop crying. But if I cried right now, you know, I know that I could process it in a safe space without being judged. Even if I did a wrong thing or I did something to cause it, they can hold me accountable without making me feel like a horrible person.
But I think women friends too also allow us to access those emotions that we were told we weren't allowed to have in that moment. Like, you know, so many, like, especially between the three of us, so many times one of us has been like, oh, this thing happened to me, like, kind of like try to shrug it off. And it's like, no.
Let's turn up. Yes.
And it helps you be like, yeah, you're right. Like, I don't deserve this. I do have the right to be upset. And because a lot of times we are so dissociated from very normal reactions because, you know, as women, as Black women, we're not allowed. And so your friends open that door, help you demonstrate what the appropriate reaction is. You know, Nubia on more than one occasion, they're like, no, you're going to make this phone call. You're going to tell them how they got you fucked up, where they fucked you up. And then you're going to feel a lot better. Okay,
but I also think that
like women friends help you do that in a way that like men, I mean, maybe like I don't want I don't want to typecast, like maybe there are like men out there, but men have their own struggles with the patriarchy where, you know, they have not been taught how to exhibit like that level of like care in many situations. The other thing too, I've realized here recently is like we were taught that being able to be friends with your exes is like a sign of maturity. So in the past few years, I've been, you know, trying to like end things on good terms and like, but then it goes back to the, wait a second, one of the reasons that we didn't work out was because you weren't being very great. So now all of a sudden you're going to be a good friend? Like, if you're not a good partner, you're probably
a worse friend.
People, you know, there are specific reasons why they weren't good partners. But for me, in a lot of situations, the reason somebody wasn't a good partner was because they did not meet that friendship criteria. And then I found myself in this situation with exes where they're still allowed to be like emotionally high maintenance, and I'm still expected to like offer, you know, them some sort of like comfort and sustenance, and I'm not receiving anything in exchange. Now
you're a pro bono therapist.
I'm not getting these free dinners. I'm not getting these like, you know, these bedroom experiences. I'm just here for you to unload your emotions on, and it's like, no, thank you. Like, we don't got to be mortal enemies, but I'm a wave and walk now. I'm a wave and walk.
Snip that snip. I love having these conversations with you all and with my family, of Black family, chosen and otherwise, of other Black women, because I'm like, that's the word. That's it. That's the word. And that's literally why I'm able to exist in the world that says that nobody wants me all the time. It says nobody wants you. But when I turn into this organism, I'm like, oh no, we love you and your feelings are valid. We're holding space for you all the time. So don't be around anybody else that doesn't do that. And I think that's been the magic, I think, you know. I mean, that's what y'all been saying, and that's what I feel anyway too. I did, speaking of words though, especially because, you know, now like self-care and all this stuff is like, it's like a buzzword, even though we know that Audre Lorde says self-care isn't selfish, it's self-preservation, and that's the only way we're able to fight in a world that hates us, basically. I paraphrase, but you know, y'all get what I'm saying. When I say these words though, for you, because y'all know I like to define the words, like what's the difference for you between like self-care and self-preservation? Because they see that all these words are thrown together, and self-indulgence, because we know all these connotations make it seem like, oh, you're wrong if you do these things. Self-care, self-preservation, self-indulgence.
I think our understanding of those words and what they actually look like are pretty skewed. Like, I think society skews them. So I had a pretty tumultuous, you know, end of winter into spring. And one of the things I decided coming out of that was I need to take care of myself. I need to protect myself. And I was like, I'm going to be a selfish woman. I made a New Year's resolution in February. It was like, from here in the year, I'm going to be selfish, and I'm not going to feel bad about it. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not even concerned about it. I'm just going to be selfish. And then what I realized, you know, by the time summer had rolled around, was that when I looked back on these situations in which I had behaved selfishly, I realized that I hadn't actually been all that selfish. Like, I just hadn't been all the way over backwards for someone. You know, I had just drawn a reasonable boundary. And the handful of times that I had, you know, betrayed myself by not going with the selfish option, it had actually made significant issues and problems in my life that just like really mushroomed and led to a lot of just like uncomfortable, stressful situations. And so I was like, oh, like my understanding of, you know, what I thought was selfish is actually really reasonable. So sometimes I think we don't know what those things actually look and or feel like. And now I have like a really different understanding, and it's, you know, really kind of like shaded my choices around not only like decisions I'm making with my life, but just like with this like dating and relationships. You know, this is a little goofy, but like I saw a meme on Instagram that was like, a woman with strong boundaries is a lonely woman. And I was like, well, damn, like all this time you're told like, oh, you need to have standards, you need to have boundaries. And at some point you deal with enough bullshit where it's like, yes, I'm going to have some standards, have some boundaries, because being compromising and flexible has not paid off. It's only like benefited the person who sought to like exploit me. But then it's like, well, shit, now I'm alone, I'm going by around, and you think you're doing it wrong or you're making a mistake. And it's like, no, that's just part of it. It's like, yeah, you might be lonely because you don't have like, you know, some romantic interest, but you also have peace. You know, you have peace and you can experience a range of emotions within that peace. You can still want for that ideal partner, but there's nothing worse than having someone in your life that's like disrupting that peace, causing stress, and still making you feel lonely. It's like, well, damn, like if I'm gonna be alone, at least I should be alone and happy. Like,
what is something real or imagined that you're looking forward to that brings you pleasure? Like real, like it doesn't have to be a real thing. What is an imagined pleasure that you're like, ooh, I look forward to this thing?
I mean, I start every day with, as a stay-at-home writer, I start every day with pleasure, because there are so few mornings now that I have to have an alarm to wake me up. So most days, in this time of year particularly, it's starting to get, you know, the sun's starting to come up later, so it'll be harder in the winter. But in the spring and the summer, when you get to wake up gently to the natural light filtering in through your window and just kind of like cozily come to, like, to me, like that's a pleasure that I look forward to every day.
Ooh, I missed that. Working from home allowed that. It does not. I loved it.
I wasn't trying to flex, Nubia.
I removed my blinds in the morning because I'm on the third floor. I removed all the blinds in my whole place just so that I could do exactly what you're saying you look forward to every morning. What about you, Shauntrice?
So I've been trying to get healthier, you know, older 30s. I don't know, are we mid-30s? Yeah, mid-30s. And I've been trying to like eat healthier, but like for me, the times when I was like most in shape or most healthy, I was just out doing things. It wasn't like I was trying to be in shape. My healthiest point my entire life was during my pregnancy, because one, I felt guilty, like I'm making a kid, so I have to like be at my peak health. And I was literally just walking every single day, talking out loud with no one around, because, you know, I read all the little blogs and books. They were like, talk to the baby. And I'm like, oh, look, it's a green tree. It's this, that, and the third. And like in my most like calm voice and being that's the nicest I've ever been to myself. I had a doula who, if you don't know, a doula is a person, not like a midwife or a nurse, but they help you more so with the like emotional changes you go through as a pregnant person. So like I would call like, I think my water broke, or I'm just really sad today, or I'm really hype, or my belly button's not doing that weird thing that the pregnant women's belly buttons do on TV, where it gets like, is it wrong? Is the baby dying? So a doula is like the emotional support for that. And so like, I was very proactive about everything. So what I'm trying to do in the last month, at least, is do those things, like actually just walk out, explore, even talking to myself out loud, although I'm not pregnant, thank you, Jesus. And, just making sure that all the things that I was doing for my kid to be healthy, I should be doing for myself so that I can have pleasure longer. Like, again, women, a lot of us don't even realize what we enjoy until we're in our 30s, maybe 40s or 50s. And so I feel like I'm owed at least 50 more years of pleasure. And I can't get to those 50 years if I am in the hospital because I'm not healthy. And so for me, it's those small things, like I'm writing down, if I've hit whatever steps, I'm writing down, and I don't have like a goal, like I want to do this many steps, but I'm writing the steps I do take down just because like it helps to have, an ongoing record of my attempt to be healthy.
And so, yeah, that for me is joy. When I look at the end of the day, I'm like, oh my God, I actually drank 64 ounces of water, partially because I have a friend who bought me a giant 64-ounce water bottle. Shout out to Minda.
You're welcome.
Why did this always come back to Minda's like?
But no, for those things like are really important. And because I was working so much and still kind of am, I didn't realize how little I was doing for myself because I was in my mind, I was like, I'm doing so much. I don't even have time to process it. So if I'm telling people like, we need to shut down Kroger because they don't give healthy food. And I realized because I'm also in that, in this food apartheid, I live in the West End and there are no great grocery stores over here, right? I am having the same symptoms that I'm talking about. And so I have to be more proactive. And thank God I have the money, resources, the time, the privilege to be able to go all the way to Trader Joe's or go out to a farm. And so I'm just trying to make sure that each day I'm writing down the things I did that lead me on that path to being healthy so that I can be on your podcast in 50 years. Like, here's the ways I get pleasure now.
Yes. Ooh, that would be a great show
for the reunion. Yes. For the reunion episode.
Yes. They'd be like 80 years old. Like, yes, what did you do today? And that's going to be my question. Because I mean, I know I could do this with y'all all day and I probably will continue this in the group chat when we finish. Well, no, because Minda got things to do today. But speaking of today, what are you all going to do that centers your pleasure today? Like in the next 20 minutes to an hour, just in general today?
I'm going to make art. I just learned how to throw pottery this week. Yeah, I know that's random. I have been trying every single type of art that I could never try because it was either too expensive or too time consuming or whatever else. So I learned how to throw pottery. And I'm going to just be making art today for most of the day. I don't have anything on the schedule. If I do, oops, it's not happening because it ain't on my calendar. So yeah, that for me, because I've went again, years and years, not feeling like I can do my art. I am going to do that today and make a whole bunch of stuff. And some of it going to be ugly. I'm working on something right now. It's not turning out well. It looks terrible, but I'm going to finish it anyway. So yeah, that's my joy for today.
Ooh, that's lovely. What about you?
I'm going to brunch and I am going to order every single item on the menu I am interested in.
I'm excited because this commitment to centering what we want to do as individuals, as friends, collectively, as Black women, as Black people, as people. I mean, I think it's an energy that is, I don't know, it's infectious in a good way, not in the COVID way, in the other way, you know. and it just brings me joy. This brings me joy, like every day. So I'm grateful that I get to call you my friend.
When we had this conversation, when Minda, Shauntrice, and I had this conversation, about a week and a half prior to this conversation, my grandmother had a stroke. And we found her in her home like the next morning. And that's a whole story in and of itself. And I remember listening to Shauntrice talk about how her grandmother is the one who taught her how to feel good. And I remember thinking in that moment, like, wow, like mine too, you know. So she had a stroke like a week and a half before I had this conversation with Shauntrice and Minda. And then she had another one about a month later. And we ended up bringing her home for hospice care after that, which was a lot, you know, on our family. And then she actually passed January of this year. I don't know that I thought that hard about her teaching me how to feel good and teaching me how to center that pleasure. I just wanted to tell her what I was doing. Like, even until the end, she just wanted the good gossip. Like, she just wanted the good stories. And I think about this woman who was born maybe 5 years after the Depression. One thing I remember her saying, but I also remember everybody remembering at her funeral, was her and her good friend Shirley, her good friend Doris, that they used to go to church partially for the churching, but also for the also for the good stories and the good gossip. That's why she went to church. And she would go to church every week to see her friends. And then they would go sometimes, on their little excursions. They play their numbers together and all that stuff like that. Thinking about how much joy it brought her, and how when it was her time to go, she could just say excitedly that she's lived a good life, and about how much the friendship she had over a 70-year period, because she was 85 when she passed away, how much that had to have contributed to that good life. Because she was, after her stroke, she was ready to go. She was like, all right. Before her stroke, she told us in 2021, she said, if it's my time, I've lived a good life. And I just think about listening to this episode, it just made me really excited. Because not that I'm ready to go. Definitely not ready to go anywhere yet. But it just made me really, it touched me deeply, thinking about how much the practice of good, deep friendship contributes to joy, and how much it contributes to just making it a pleasure practice. And how, not to say that we should de-emphasize the relationship part of it, because that's good too, but like how much your friends actually really mean. So that's it from me today. Now I want to hear from you. How did you center your own pleasure today? Hit me up at sprinklesparkle.org.
Sprinkle Sparkle is created and hosted by Nubia Bennett and produced by me, Alex Biscardi. Our music is by Allison Cross, and Mindy Folner does our graphic design. Sprinkle Sparkle is part of the Louisville Public Media Podcast Incubator, with support from the Community Foundation of Louisville and the Eye Care Institute's Butchertown Clinical Trials. Our executive producer is Laura Ellis. For more episodes and to keep in touch, visit sprinklesparkle.org. From LPM, Louisville Public Media.
Support comes from the Eye Care Institute and Butchertown Clinical Trials, where they strive for diversity, equity, and inclusion within their staff, patients, and clinical trial participants. To learn more, visit butchertown.clinic.
Coming up on In Conversation, we continue our exploration of home and housing with a focus on renting. Join us Friday morning at 11 Eastern Time on 89.3 WFPL at WFPL.org or wherever you get your podcasts.